Hi there, Steve Kaufman here, Steve's Cafe, ranting as usual. Today I want to talk about multiculturalism because I got a message in English and then another one in French from Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, whom I don't hold in very high regard, congratulating us all Canadians that today is Multiculturalism Day. I am opposed to official multiculturalism. I think it's a bad idea. Trudeau likes to promote it. He came to the Ukraine-Canada Business Forum and stressed the importance of multiculturalism. This was followed by the Minister of Commerce, Chrystia Freeland, who is of Ukrainian origin, talking about connections to the Ukrainian community and stuff like that. And I felt that all of that was quite inappropriate for a trade conference, because we can't have a trade minister who is of the ethnic origin of every one of the countries that we deal with. I think Canadians should be Canadian. What people choose to do on their own is entirely up to them. I don't think that Canada should force people to assimilate, should force people to think one way or another. But the country, the government shouldn't encourage people to stay apart. And our Prime Minister does that. He constantly says things like, diversity is strength. And in fact, addressing some business people in New York, he even went as far as to say that Canada has no mainstream culture. I disagree strongly. I think that diversity is not a strength nor a weakness. It just is, or it isn't, and it really doesn't matter. Because once you say that diversity is a strength, and we're never sure what that means, diversity of, ethnic origin, diversity of point of view, which the Liberals are not so fond of, diversity of culture, like what's diversity? And if we're talking about diversity of ethnic origin, if we look at the most innovative countries in the world, and on that score, the Scandinavian countries, which also rank very highly in terms of places that are respected in the world and considered great places to live, they're not necessarily the greatest centers of diversity. Or at the very least, the recent arrival of large numbers of immigrants has not made them more innovative, not made them nicer places to live. It's basically the institutions that were there beforehand, the institutions that were created by people who were not so very diverse. So to me, diversity is irrelevant. In fact, I believe we should get beyond diversity. If I see a Canadian who is of Indian origin, or maybe from Jamaica or from China, if they're Canadian, they want to be Canadian, they're Canadian. I don't see them as diverse. I want to see them as part of our community. What's more, I want them to consider themselves as part of our community, so we all have a sense of solidarity for each other. And in fact, statistically, that's what's happening. Despite government claims that Canada is this great beacon of multiculturalism, in fact, that's not what happens. Canadians, I've seen a number of polls that show that Canadians are more inclined to say immigrants should assimilate to the mainstream culture than Americans. I saw a statistic again saying, mixed marriages are still not that common in Canada, only 4.5%. Mixed meaning marriage between someone of what in Canada they call visible minority with someone who is not a visible minority, which again is a stupid term in my opinion, but 4.5%. But visible minorities only account for 19.5 or 20% of the population. So 1 in 4 member of a visible minority marries a non-visible. But that's not such a small number. That's actually quite a large number. And it means a significant number of visible minority people. And when you consider that most visible minorities were born outside Canada. So if we're talking about visible minorities born in Canada, who go to school in Canada, quite naturally they have a tendency to marry people of other ethnic groups to a significant degree. May not be the majority, but a large number. And then what happens to multiculturalism? If you've got people of two different ethnic groups, and in fact, if we forget for a minute visible and non-visible, which is a stupid term. If we just talk about ethnic origin, if you look at Ukrainian Canadians, Italian Canadians, Scottish Canadians, any kind of Canadians, Japanese Canadians, by the second or third generation, more than 2/3 of those people are married to someone of a different ethnic origin. Now, they may choose to maintain some of the traditions or the language of one or the other or of several of their origins, and that's fine, and they can do that privately. But the suggestion in Canada is, diversity is good. So if you live in a community that has lots of Portuguese and Indians and Chinese and stuff, that's good. If you happen to live in a part of Nova Scotia where everybody is, Scottish, English, French origin, all white, well, that's bad then, because diversity is a strength. So lack of diversity, therefore, is a weakness, according to our Prime Minister. To me, that's stupid. In fact, diversity is irrelevant. What's far more important is solidarity within our community and a willingness to accept people for what they are. I have no trouble. I'm not a fan of people showing, outwardly they're belonging to different religions. I mean, my family happens to be of Jewish origin, so I see Jewish people wearing this Jewish paraphernalia. But they're free to do that, That in a way, it's telling me I'm not part of you. I'm part of this other group. But it's okay. That's there to say. I have no right to tell them what to wear. If we have a Minister of Defense who's a Sikh, who wears his turban, he fought in the Canadian Army, he's totally Canadian, he's with the program. That's good. We have Sikhs wearing their turbans who go and watch hockey. That's good. If they want to have an interest in whatever other activity that is part of their tradition, fine. But the Prime Minister shouldn't go around saying we have no common culture in Canada. We do. And in fact, it attracts newcomers. Maybe not the first generation, but certainly the second generation. Even the first generation are attracted to come here because we have a quality of life, form of government, the way we deal with each other, which is attractive, which is better than what they had in their country of origin, or they wouldn't come here. And the second generation, the people who are born here, they tend to speak English. You can come across, a schoolyard full of Chinese people here in Vancouver. They're all speaking English to each other. And they follow the Vancouver Canucks, and they get involved in things Canadian. Not all of them, and not to the exclusion of the ancestral culture. But there's no point in suggesting that there is no common culture. There is. And if we look forward a few generations, where there is increasing intermarriage, we don't want a society where here is this outpost of this diaspora and here's this outpost of that diaspora. We want people to kind of come together and do things in common and get along with their neighbors. And so all I'm saying is that for example, in my own case, my parents were born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, spoke Czech and German. I didn't speak either language until well after I had learned Chinese and French. And then I developed an interest in German, not because it had anything to do with the language that my parents spoke. I don't speak Yiddish, I don't speak Hebrew. Then I started learning Czech only after I had learned Russian. The culture's not in the genes. People should be free to learn or to get interested in whatever language culture they're interested in. And there is no, I see all these people sending their kids to Ukrainian school, Chinese school, Japanese school. That's fine. Do that if you want to do that. But there is nothing morally superior about someone studying the language of their ancestry as opposed to studying some other language. So whenever I see the Liberals carrying on with all this multiculturalism stuff, I say the government has nothing to do with promoting multiculturalism. The government should run our country, make and not just the government, the rest of us, make the common culture as attractive, as welcoming, as inclusive as possible, and don't say that it doesn't exist. And don't say stuff that simply isn't true, that diversity is a source of strength. Diversity simply is. In some places, and in other places it isn't, and it really doesn't matter. If you say tolerance is good, tolerance is a sort of source of strength, agreed. If you say everybody getting along well, regardless of their origins, is a source of strength, I agree. But to simply say diversity is strength, multiculturalism is good, I'm against it. So there you have it. My rant for today, Canada's Day of Multiculturalism. Bye for now.